In the late 1950s, America wasn't just building cars, it was dreaming in chrome and jet fuel. This was the golden age of optimism, when rockets were roaring into space, jets were redefining speed, and atomic power was promising a future beyond imagination. Every industry wanted to tap into that energy, and the auto world was no exception. General Motors didn't just follow the trend, they tried to outrun it. The result? The Firebird series, a trio of concept cars that looked like they were built for astronauts, not commuters. But it was the 1958 Firebird III that truly shattered expectations. Designed by Harley Earl and his team at GM's Dream Department, it was unlike anything the world had ever seen. With needle-sharp fins, a bubble canopy that looked like it belonged on a fighter jet, and curves sculpted for speed, it wasn't just futuristic, it was science fiction on wheels. But the Firebird III wasn't just about looks. It was part of a bigger vision, a radical idea that the future of driving could be powered by the same technology that lifted planes into the sky. This wasn't a car meant for your driveway. It was meant to redefine what a car could be. Underneath the Firebird III's wild bodywork was a heart that didn't beat, it roared. Instead of a traditional piston engine, GM fitted it with a gas turbine, the kind used in fighter jets and helicopters. Why? Because in theory, it was the perfect engine for the future. Fewer moving parts, higher power-to-weight ratio, smoother acceleration. It sounded like the next step in automotive evolution. And it wasn't just for show. GM believed turbine technology could revolutionize how cars performed. The Firebird III's engine, dubbed the Whirlfire GT-305, promised whisper-smooth highway cruising and blistering speed with no gear shifts, no vibration, and none of the clunky lag of old-school combustion engines. It was fast, futuristic, and alien to anything drivers had experienced before. But there was a catch, a big one. Gas turbines, while powerful, were never meant for civilian roads. The engine ran at insanely high temperatures, hot enough to scorch anything behind the exhaust. And it didn't just hum, it screamed, unleashing a high-pitched whine more fitting for a runway than a city street. Still, GM pushed forward, convinced that the world would adapt to this new kind of engine. But behind the scenes, regulators and engineers were starting to see the cracks in the dream, and what came next would threaten to shut it all down. If the engine didn't convince you this car came from the future, the design certainly did. The Firebird III looked less like a vehicle and more like a spacecraft that accidentally landed on Earth. With its razor-sharp tail fins, clear bubble canopy, and low-slung, aerodynamic body, it made every other car on the road look like a relic from the past. The styling wasn't subtle. It was a full-blown tribute to the jet age. Those massive rear fins, inspired by fighter planes. The cockpit-style canopy, straight from aviation blueprints. Even the car's control system abandoned the traditional steering wheel for something more radical. Joystick steering, as if you were piloting a rocket, not driving a Buick. Everything about the Firebird III screamed excess, but in the best possible way. It didn't care about convention, it cared about possibility. GM was sending a message. This is what cars of tomorrow could look like. And for a moment, it felt like the future was right around the corner. But behind the shine and spectacle, trouble was quietly brewing, because no matter how stunning it looked, the Firebird III still had to answer one simple question: could it actually work on the road? Behind the dazzling design and space-age engine was a harsh truth. The Firebird III was a mechanical marvel that simply couldn't survive in the real world. The most immediate issue was heat. Gas turbines run at extremely high temperatures, and the Firebird's exhaust could reach levels hot enough to melt bumpers, scorch pavement, or seriously injure anyone standing too close. It wasn't just a design flaw, it was a public safety hazard. Then there was the sound. While GM called it futuristic, the high-pitched whine of the turbine engine was so loud it could shatter the peace of any neighborhood. Instead of the comforting purr of AV8, you got the ear-splitting shriek of a jet taking off. But the real nail in the coffin came from something less flashy but far more dangerous: emissions. Turbine engines pumped out unburned hydrocarbons and nitrogen oxides at levels no government could ignore. Environmental concerns were growing, and the Firebird III's exhaust output didn't just break regulations, it obliterated them. Regulators were quick to take notice. And as the scrutiny mounted, it became clear the Firebird III, for all its brilliance, was too hot, too loud, and too dirty to ever see public roads. It wasn't a failure of design, it was a collision with reality. As the flaws of turbine technology became impossible to ignore, regulators around the world started drawing a hard line. The Firebird III wasn't just inconvenient, it was unacceptable. The scorching exhaust, the jet-like noise, and the choking emissions left no room for compromise. It was too dangerous, too loud, and too dirty. Governments didn't need to issue a public statement. The message was clear: This car could never be legalized for road use. Safety agencies flagged the turbine's extreme heat as a threat to people and property. Environmental authorities condemned the emissions, and transportation departments couldn't imagine a world where city streets echoed with the howl of jet engines. And GM wasn't alone. Chrysler's turbine car, which had also captured public imagination, met the same brutal fate. Quietly, without fanfare, the industry backed away. Behind closed doors, automakers reached an unspoken agreement. Turbine cars were a dead end. The Firebird III was never recalled, because it never made it past the concept stage. Instead, it was silently banned by reality itself. The dream of a jet-powered future was over, and the world moved on without it. With its future on the road officially shut down, the Firebird III was no longer a prototype, it became a time capsule. General Motors, knowing they had created something too bold to simply discard, retired the vehicle into their private collection. It was never driven on highways, never sold to the public. Instead, it was preserved as a monument to imagination. Today, the Firebird III sits behind velvet ropes in museums and car exhibitions around the world. It doesn't move, but it still turns heads. Its massive fins, crystal-clear canopy, and turbine-powered hard draw crowds who stare not just at a car, but at a what if. What if the world had been ready for it? What if regulations had caught up to innovation? What if we were all commuting in turbine-powered pods by now? But the Firebird III's legacy isn't defined by what it failed to become. It's defined by what it dared to dream. It stands as a stunning reminder that sometimes, the most incredible ideas aren't meant to live in the present. They're meant to challenge it. Even though it never saw production, the Firebird III left an unmistakable mark on automotive history. It became the poster child of unrealized ambition, not because it failed, but because it went further than anyone else dared to. Designers, engineers, and futurists still look to it as a benchmark of what's possible when limits are ignored. Its radical ideas, from joystick steering to autonomous guidance systems, were dismissed as fantasy back then. But decades later, those same concepts are being revived in modern electric and autonomous vehicles. The Firebird III was ahead of its time, not by years, but by generations. It also redefined what a concept car could be. Before the Firebird series, concept cars were mostly mild experiments, but the Firebird III turned that idea on its head, proving that concepts could be bold, insane, and completely untethered from reality. It inspired a wave of show cars in the 1960s and beyond, each one chasing that same spark of futuristic energy. More importantly, it reminded the industry and the public that cars aren't just machines, they're dreams on wheels. And even if some of those dreams are too wild to survive, they still push the world forward by showing what could be. The 1958 GM Firebird III wasn't just a car, it was a statement. A fearless, turbocharged vision of the future that dared to break every rule in the book. It promised a world of jet-powered highways, joystick steering, and space-age style, and for a brief moment, it felt like that world was within reach. But dreams, no matter how spectacular, must eventually face reality. The Firebird III collided with the cold, immovable forces of regulation, safety, and practicality, and lost. It never hit the streets, never got a license plate, and never roared through city traffic like its creators imagined. Yet that doesn't make it a failure. It remains one of the most iconic concept cars ever built, not because it changed the future, but because it dared to imagine one so radically different. It challenged the limits of design, questioned the status quo of engineering, and reminded us that progress always begins with a dream too bold for its time. Today, the Firebird III is frozen in museums, but its message still echoes: don't be afraid to build the impossible, because even if the world isn't ready, history will remember those who tried.